Hey, everybody. Thanks for showing up to the code review weekly workshop. Um, yeah, so let's kick it off with some show and tell and questions. Um, so I wanted to show a couple of interesting things that came up from this one MR. Um, Let me go ahead and share my screen so we're looking at the same thing. Um, First off, huge thanks to Deepika for picking up this community contribution and finishing it off. So this is like a year-old community contribution. We usually don't like to just close them. We'll try to finish it for them uh if they have stopped contributing to that MR. So she opened up this new MR to finish it off. That was all really great. Um we added some tests and originally um let me see if I can I start it how am I going to do this? Oh, I bet I could look at it by the commit. Yes. No. All right. I'll have to look at it just here. So this was the old, or this is the new spec changes where we have a test that in the middle is doing the action and at the end of it was doing the assertion. So you see the green lines, we added lines before and after. And whether you're doing back end or front end, anytime there's like after an action, we expect some sort of state to be changed. It's pretty good to have somewhere in the test something that asserts either the default state that would have been in just a totally separate test, or it's even totally cool to just put it before the action in the very test itself. And one of the things when we did this, for instance, when we click on this, we would expect it visually the visibility should change. But what happened when we actually moved this before the action to is visible to be false, that actually never changed because is visible actually doesn't quite behave the way that we expected it to. So this test wasn't actually doing everything we thought it was. Um, so that happens a lot whenever you're doing an action that could change state. To get really good test coverage, asserting the default state either in a separate test or in the same test that's doing the action, having a before and after expectations can be really helpful. Yeah. And the one other point about that MR was not sure if you all are aware that we have a whole process for finishing merge requests. And this is usually done by MR coaches, which work closely with the community to help triage their MRs and help community contributions get pushed forward. Uh, but really, like any engineer can get pinged to finish a community contribution. And probably the biggest task here that might be unknown, besides just, hey, we're just going to finish this thing, is to try to preserve some sort of original commit that gives credit to the author. Um, I don't think it can actually be a Git trailer. I don't think our changelog process supports author as an actual Git trailer. I think it actually has to be the author of a commit. Um, so I need to change this wording because I don't think that's correct. And I hope someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Uh, so what I had done here in this MR, I just rebased because I don't think Deepika was aware of that because it's tucked away in MR coach documentation. Um, but I had just rebased the commit she made. Uh, and then I chose to edit that first one. And then I just amended it, but applied the author of the commit that we were coming from. Because that old MR actually had like merge commits in it. So I tried cherry picking the commit and I got a whole bunch of unrelated changes, and that was undesirable. So I think it was sufficient enough to just amend the author to the first commit. Um, so yeah, if you ever find yourself needing to do that, that's a thing. So Cool. Do you have any thoughts about finishing MRs tests? I'm pausing because I'll just talk for an hour. I need to force myself to stop. All right. Cool. Thanks. Where we at, Sam?
Yeah, so I just had an MR that I reviewed this week where I felt a bit, I was swimming in the deeps for a while. So felt like I had to read into a lot of around it in context to figure out what was actually going on. And it felt like it took me 2-ish days to actually start reviewing the code and not just trying to catch up to where this is. And I'm kind of wondering, might it have been better to hand it off to a domain expert instead of trying to get myself up to speed with this? It's always a strange trade-off, but yeah, maybe you guys have some pointers for that.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, that one is something I struggle with sometimes when the MRs have a lot of like already discussion on the MR or also a very long, I'm looking at the MR now, maybe like a very long description. I would say I am encouraged by they have set, instructions on how to set it up locally. So I feel like that would make me maybe want to look at it more than if there's no instructions on how to validate it. Has the MR had a review from someone like in the team that owns this already?
There were people already commenting on it,
Okay.
but not as a reviewer, if I got that correctly.
For me, I feel like the non-domain expert review is like really, really valuable. So like I'm not inclined to just, if something is hard to understand, if you're not familiar with it, that's a really good signal of maybe the thing is hard to understand in general. Uh, so I appreciate from time to time I'll put MRs and I'll get people reviewing it, and their perspective is just so valuable because I realize that I'm taking a lot for granted of how familiar I am with this code base, and I really appreciate all the questions they're asking. So um that's I would say, yeah, at some point maybe it is warranted of like, hey, I don't think I can do, let's try to make sure either the maintainer's a domain expert or another domain expert looks at this. But just doing a flurry of all of your questions, that would be great. I feel like so you don't have to feel like you have to learn it all yourself from scratch, but just saying I'm unfamiliar and I have a bunch of questions about it. And sometimes I'll even just leave non-blocking questions, and that can create follow-up issues because things, yeah, are legitimately confusing. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, that sounds like a good perspective, especially with the complexity. Kind of like that.
Yeah, I've often find myself struggling with like GraphQL MRs, even like I'm a maintainer, but I don't do GraphQL at my team doesn't we don't work in GraphQL. So every time I look at it, I'm like, oh God, and I have to go like refresh myself. But it is, I don't know. I find it like nice because I want to see more. The feature that I work on is like so specific that I don't interact a ton with other areas of the code base. But I do get the apprehension when you look at something and you're like, oh, this is going to take me some time.
Yeah.
Not a feeling that has gone away after becoming a maintainer. So
Yeah. And for me, that's why I set a timer. And it's like if I can't understand this on my own, I move to starting asking questions. Like if the author was sitting right next to me, what questions would I ask to um to try to understand this? Because yeah, if you're trying to understand something that's really outside your domain, you could easily spend a whole day on it, and that's more than you expect, or more than you've originally budgeted for.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm gonna pause, see if anyone else wants to chime in with their thoughts on domain expert reviews versus non-domain expert reviews.
I joined late. Sorry about that.
you're good.
I joined because I've just become a reviewer, and yeah, it's super intimidating. Like, it's sort of like I feel like I'm just sort of still getting up to speed with what my team looks after. And even there's a bunch of questions I have. So yeah, it's kind of a bit scary. I mean, I'm guessing because I've just become a reviewer, all of the things I've been asked to review are very simple changes that are just very easy to approve so far. But yeah, I am kind of dreading sort of, getting pinged on something where I'm just like, what? Because a lot of the merge requests in my own team, I'm still, sort of going, okay, what's happening here?
And there's so much history to the GitLab code base that
Yeah.
so much inconsistencies that yeah, I mean it's like as a brand new reviewer, it's kind of like uncovering an ancient civilization. You're like, oh wow, this totally changes my perspective on the entire civilization.
Yeah.
The Yeah, well, hey, that's awesome. And but I'm excited for you to having fun with code review. It's a great way to learn about the code base and for us to break silos. Um yeah, and then I would just suggest that the main value I feel like we're trying to hit with that initial code review is collaboration. And so don't feel a whole lot of pressure with I need to understand everything. Just asking questions can be so valuable. So,
Yeah, when you said that earlier, I sort of felt a bit of relief. I was like, okay, good.
yeah.
I mean, the other thing is, I think, like, as a developer, I don't think code reviews have been a strong part of my, yeah, I don't think it's one of my stronger skills. And so I'm also keen to improve stuff. I've read the guide to code reviews that there's in the handbook, but if there's any other kind of guides or things that are kind of helpful in terms of just sort of, best practices.
That's a great question. Does anyone have
Or
anything?
even how to approach things when you're just a bit stumped by apart from asking questions, which I think is,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have any guides, but I am a pretty big proponent of like manual testing. If you're maybe not familiar with an area, that does help me. It's also caught bugs. More at previous companies. I feel like here I don't always. Sometimes run into stuff where you test it and maybe they don't work exactly the way that you would expect. Or
Terry, was that when you say manual testing, you mean like kind of running?
Yeah, I check the branch out, get GDK up and running, and I try if it's something that can be like that's like a UI or like an API that I can run. Also, especially with like the GraphQL stuff, I don't know GraphQL super well, so like manually testing that. Like I come from, I used to work as a performance tester, so like I'm always like I want to break it.
Yeah. Well, I come before I was working as a developer. I worked in the product part and the UX part, so doing that is always. I often do that first just to see if it's actually working before I try and understand the code.
I will say I do feel more comforted when people have the instructions already in the description as suggested, because to me that indicates that they've already gone through some form of manual testing to write those instructions out.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, good suggestion. I see Paul's writing about review apps. I just only recently figured out what those were. So I
Those
work
are
in like
those are really
the
helpful. Yeah.
they are very helpful.
Let me maybe I have one already open so I can show what it looks like. Yes. All right, yeah. Let me share my screen. So I'm gonna say review apps. Yeah, you can get, you can get
Oh
this
yeah.
locally, but or if the pipeline's passed and cross your fingers and everything of this thing deployed correctly, there's usually a button that says review to view the app. And then our login credentials are in our engineering one password organization. And so this can be an easy way to test some changes. Some changes need like configuration stuff before you've started the GDK, and clearly we can't do that here. There is a way to like turn off and on feature flags with review apps.
I was about to say there should be a way. Yeah.
But it's through the API, and I always forget like how to do it. It'd be so cool if we could do a Rails console into the review app. I wish we could do that. But I don't know, maybe
Where is the review app deployed usually? What environment? Because it may be that we can.
well, I would think that it's possible. I would think it's just,
You might need to request access.
yeah.
I think if you're a developer on staging, you don't need to request access.
Yeah,
Am
I'm not
am I
really
wrong?
sure.
Ah,
I'm not entirely sure. I get nervous
I-
about
yeah.
adding keys to my keychain, because sometimes I drop and lose my keys. I misplace them. Yeah. You asked a great question about just general best practices, and I want to maybe we can talk about it for just a couple more minutes. I'm gonna do a shameless plug of a communication best practice that has really revolutionized how I communicate on MRs, um, called conventional comments. Uh, so whenever I leave review comments, I always preface it with a label. And this is actually more for myself, as much as maybe not more, but it's as much for myself as the person reading it. Because if I'm leaving a suggestion, I should probably leave a suggestion. Me just saying this isn't right isn't a suggestion. And then also just being able to tag a whole bunch of things as non-blocking. So if I notice user-facing issues, I'll leave these issue labels and stuff. So um, I describe a handful of labels that I find helpful and have seen used in the wild. Um, so you might see that happening in MRs that you review or author, but this has been really helpful for me because I also don't like to be thinking about how I'm going to phrase something a lot. So this actually automates a lot of that thought process of how I want to phrase something.
Are these not also already listed in the handbook? I'm not sure.
The handbook has a link to this actually.
Yeah, because I came across it when starting GitLab, and I've been using it ever since as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found a nifty Alfred workflow for it as well. That's kind of neat.
What did you say?
I found an Alfred workflow. There's this launcher app Alfred.
Oh,
Like a
yes.
bunch of utilities, and
Yeah.
I just do like double exclamation CC, and then it'll pop up a menu, give me like
That's
a
so
selector, like what kind of comment would I like to leave, and then it'll just paste it in there, like pre-formatted and everything. That's pretty neat.
So
that's
Alfred's a sort of utility application
Yeah.
that you can
Yeah.
install. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just in
You
case
can
anyone doesn't
trigger
know.
workflows and snippets and things like that with it. Yeah.
What was it? Did you customize the command yourself, or is there one?
No, I need to look where I found it. I did tweak it a little to my preferences, but it was more or less complete.
there's a lot of like browser extensions and stuff for conventional comments, which is if you like installing third-party software on your computer, should go for it.
Are we allowed to do that?
I think we're allowed to do it. I'm paranoid, so I don't like to I turned JavaScript off.
Third-party software, like add some keys to my keychain.
Sorry,
I'm
say
not-
that again, Chad. I missed a bit of that.
I said I like to have my third-party software install some keys on my keychain. I'm like the opposite security perspective as Paul. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm always a bit nervous
I'll
about
do it.
browser extensions in particular, just because the browser is such a kind of yeah, it's such a kind of risky vector for
Yeah. Well, we actually have a browser extension that's for conventional comments. We have one. Like I would just suggest if you're going to do that, I think everyone has their own. You're getting to personal philosophy, but like we have our own that is open source, and so that's a little nice. But it is scary when you install browser extensions and they want all sorts of privileges. Like we'd like to deposit to your checking account. Like that's a big red flag.
I've never seen that, but
Yeah.
I don't tend to
cool.
avoid browsers.
Cool. Thanks for bringing that up, Carla. That was a good discussion, good question. Yeah, good luck and have fun code reviewing.
Yeah. One thing I'd also like to add, I like to start with reading what the issue was about before I even dive into the code. A, to know what it's about and a little bit more depth, and B, to see if the MR actually does what the issue was trying to ask for. Because I'll notice myself if I'm working on an issue for a longer time and I haven't reread it in a while, I might have an idea of what I think I was trying to solve, but it's actually different. And then when I reread the issue, I'm like, oh no, I implemented this wrong. This isn't what the issue was asking for. So yeah, it helps to start with that.
Good tips.
Cool. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to the show and tell or questions part of this session? Coming up is pair reviewing, which I'll be eager to get to because we didn't really get to have a whole lot of time last time. But if someone does have something that would be valuable, let's talk about it. Let's share it. All right, let's jump into some code reviews. Does anyone have any MRs that they would like to? Maybe we could all mob pair review on it. So if you're not familiar with how we do pair programming on our backend or front end pair programming sessions, usually there's one person driving and they share their screen. And then the rest are observing, navigating, discussing, and it's usually surprisingly works really well. So it's kind of this mob pairing thing, and it's facilitates some really good collaboration and knowledge sharing. So yeah, I have some MRs, but I don't want to be so attention seeking, which I tend to be. Oh, a database MR in the future. Yeah, that's a great idea, Terry. So yeah, if you get pinged on a database MR on
yeah, because
Monday,
to me those are
just
like
leave it.
terrifying.
Oh yeah.
The review process for a database MR to me is like significantly different than a backend, just a straight backend review. So I will keep my eyes open for the next one that I get.
That'd be cool. And maybe even just sharing it in retro too. Like if you don't, if it's not feasible for you to save it for this session, saving it for retro of like what this was like would be cool.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could always do like a simulated MR review on one that's already been merged.
Yeah, sounds great.
I'll look for one for next time.
Okay. So I have one here. I haven't reviewed it yet. So let's do it. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna open up this MR. So the goal here, we're a mixed bag of front end and back end right now. The goal is to mainly facilitate discussing the review process, the review decisions, code review, which we all do. So not necessarily the technical specifics, but maybe is something a blocking comment or not? And yeah. So let's check out the context of this MR. Highlight runner name and move locked icon. This is Miguel, writes great MRs. Updates run name so it appears bold and move the locked icon next to it. Some UI polish stuff. Here's a screenshot. It's bold and the locked icon has moved over. So this is like this seems, and there's only one file change. I love MRs that have like a really simple scope and there's only one file change. MRs that have a really simple scope and is like 12 files changed make me like so nervous. Okay. So I see we have this slot, which we don't have to worry about the specifics of, but it looks like we are simply wrapping this slot that was previously there, where that runner name, I guess, will get injected around with a strong element. And we have moved this runner badge over so that the icon is before it. And we added these classes. So this all looks fine. This is sticking out to me a little bit because so there's a technical specific here when it comes to strong elements. They can only contain inline. So I always feel funny about this from the front end because browsers are pretty forgiving, but there is like an HTML specification that certain elements can only have certain kinds of children. And strong elements can only have inline children. And given that this is a slot, previously that slot could be anything, could be a div, span, whatever, which is part of this component's interface. But now we're kind of limiting the scope of what this slot can do, because technically it should only be probably a span or even just raw text. On top of that, this happens so often, especially with backenders that write front-end code. I'm sorry, backenders, I'm picking on you all. Strong. So there's a whole semantic I guess I don't know if this is still a thing, but like semantic HTML we tried to prioritize it sometime. Strong also means like urgent, like your child is sick, urgent. So we use it all the time, just the bold text. It's not really what it's meant for. So this is great. I feel like it's all gonna work. It clearly showed screenshots that it's gonna work, but it's like, there's other ways to do this, and like maybe strong wasn't the right element to use here. And so my question I'm asking myself right now is, do I ask a non-blocking comment? Do I not say anything? Do I just leave a small suggestion of like, could we do this? Where do you all land on this?
I'm thinking if we are using this runner name component anywhere outside, and if it makes sense to just change the style of the text in there.
That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. Let me check this out locally so that I can navigate not Mux. Oh, I can't nest I'm already in Tmux land. Let me check this out locally so we can dive into it.
That was a really, really good observation, Anna, because if it is only used one place, you're keeping it more cohesive and less coupled to this component. And then in the future, if this perhaps is used somewhere else, it will still be bold. Like, does the bold belong with whatever is in this slot, or does the bold belong here?
Yes. Where does it belong is a really good question. Yeah. All right. So I love to just curl the diff and apply it rather than checking out the branch.
That's like a life changer when you taught me that, Paul. It's so useful.
Yeah. Cool.
Literally saves hours and hours of my life.
Especially when you have the GDK running. Cool. So yeah, we're wrapping in strong. Let's check out runner name and see where that's used. So runner name, seeing where this is all imported. So it comes from runner summary cell and admin runners app and group runners app. So admin runners app. Yeah, maybe we can't. Maybe we can't. Maybe it should be. And that's a good question. That's a question to ask. So like, do we want to just put this in runner name? Like, should we always bold it? That's a really good question. I think I want to ask that question. That's a non-blocking question to me. I like that thought though. So I'm gonna ask question non-blocking. Do we want I'm gonna say maybe we want all runner names to always be bold. Should we add this to runner name? Yeah, that's a good question.
Or
Yeah,
maybe this styling belongs in the component, at the higher level. So it's
yeah, add or remove this to runner name is what you're saying, right? This bolding. Yeah. So for me personally, I would leave this as, since there's nothing urgent here, and I'm like, let's not misuse strong. I'm leaving a polished comment of like, hey, let's just polish it up. This is the first MR cycle. This is the only small thing I see. It's like this, yeah, we like to merge things, but let's just polish it up a little bit. And I'm saying that strong, let me double check my assumptions. Strong, the strong importance element. The contents of strong importance, seriousness, or urgency. So I'm actually going to say strong semantically isn't appropriate here on the NDN docs. Oh,
so
yep.
I've only been writing HTML like almost since it came out. And I never knew this. I thought like strong bold was deprecated and you were always supposed to use strong. Like, is it written down somewhere?
Well, I mean, it's written down here.
In Paul's head?
But that's going to reference the standard, which
But
is,
where does it say like bold should be used if you're not talking about your child being lost? Like, is that can you give some authority that
so that's
says that?
that's CSS's job. Like that's what it's trying to say is like this is something that the browser owns to style for these reasons. And like semantics are going to be used like the browser will parse them for alley reasons too of like
You're talking about HTML versus CSS.
yes. So if
So
like
you
we want
possibly
to
have like a reference to, or just like a link to that concept, semantic styling, like to provide some education
yeah, we
along with
actually
this.
have that in our docs.
Okay.
If you do a search for HTML semantic, I bet we'll find it. Yep, there we go.
And again, I understood you wrong. I thought you meant like use bold, but you meant use CSS.
Yes.
Good
Yeah.
to be explicit.
Yeah. Prefer semantic classes used accurately. Probably just regular class. I don't know what semantic classes means, but yeah. Um, yep. So strong element isn't quite appropriate here. Also, I'm pretty sure this just limits the children to inline elements.
It should.
Yeah, since we receive a slot, this might be unexpected clients of this component. Could we just use a do? Yeah. Cool. Add to review. Great. Yeah. I'm gonna. I got Zoom controls all over the place. Okay. Sorry.
And it makes you look crazy because we can't see them.
Like, whoa, Paul's just really spazzing out after leaving that comment. Yeah. And so then,
The other thing that I was going to point out is how you made the line you chose was the ending tag. So when you click to that comment, it's going to scroll and show you all of the relevant context.
yeah, that's a good, yes.
Song in the end of it.
That is a good point too. I didn't even think about that, but yeah. Anticipating the context of how these are going to be read is helpful. Thanks so much for this, MR, Miguel. Left some comments for your consideration. Some small comments for your consideration. Back to you. All right. Thanks for helping me get my work done, everybody.
Quick question. I thought we were. Are we still unassigning ourselves, or should we stay
Yes.
on?
Wait,
I've read otherwise, but I don't remember
have we really?
if we've gone
I
back
think
on
currently that's the case. There's the review group is in the process of redesigning this process and soliciting feedback, and there's some issues open in several epics about splitting this into different states, how to represent it in the UI.
because I know we still have that request review.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought you were supposed to unassign yourself. Because it kind of went one way and then it flipped back, but now
that's
I
what I
can't.
was not sure of, if it flipped back
They
to
added the UI element with it in the right with the treatment, but then they abandoned that feature and they're not doing that. So now I think they're iterating on other aspects of the design of more like the workflow in different stages to, you know, whether you're requested or re-requested and who has the responsibility for it.
Yeah.
interesting, because I still see the reload sign that says request review.
Here's the link where I think it talks about. This is not really related to.
Unassigning
But-
yourself.
Yeah, but it's really not. I couldn't find, that's like, it's in the link under dog fooding the reviewers feature, but I couldn't quickly find where, because it says, oh, here's a summary of the changes also reflected in this section above. I can't find in the section above quickly. The maintainer should stay listed, but I want to look at where's the responsibility of the reviewer.
I have no idea.
Oh, okay. It's under the responsibility. The last thing in the responsibility of the reviewer section, it says remove yourself as a reviewer. But that did get, yeah, it got changed back when the review requests feature got reverted or turned off.
Yeah. So we should remove ourselves. That's our signal.
As a reviewer, yes. As a maintainer, yeah. Well,
unless you're merging it, I think.
Unless you're, yeah. As a when you're still in review and it's going back and forth, it's confusing. But
yeah, the last approver stays as reviewer, who would presumably be the maintainer.
Yeah.
Whoever merges it.
Yeah, I must remove myself. I rely on this list of MRs that I need to go through so much that I'd be really disappointed if my list stops working because I had to leave myself a sign.
And that's the feedback I was giving to them yesterday as part of their work on this. I was like, I have an email-centric workflow and I have a like an automated job that gives it a big red label that says reviewer when that special header is in the email contents.
Yeah.
Which works most of the time, but like that doesn't work well for unassigning and reassigning myself, then I have to go in and watch this, which is that's 2 places to look.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got another MR that'd be interesting. Does anyone else have an MR that they would like to dive into? Does anyone just like really, do they have their own MR that they just want me to merge it right now? I'm joking, but it is true. This one is interesting. This is working with an interesting part of our app. Is this the one that I'm thinking of? Oh no, I think this. No, I was thinking a different one. That one is interesting. All MRs I get are interesting. That wasn't the one I was thinking of though. This one is about adding some tracking to our pipeline wizard. So we're having I think it's behind a feature flag, but it's a wizard for creating the YAML needed for pages pipeline. It's kind of cool. I'd already done a review on this, but Giannis was out. And so this is kind of getting resurrected from a handful of weeks of inactivity. Some of the comments I left was, one of them was, we were emitting events whenever the editor was touched, where someone can actually change they go to change the YAML themselves. And whenever I see events like this from experience, I get nervous that like, how often are we doing this? Like, how often is touch happening? And it was happening like every keystroke. Like it was emitting, easily 100 events if someone was typing something. And so if we were going to track all of those events, that would be undesirable. So I think it seems like Giannis addressed this. So I'm interested to see how that happened. I think he probably used once to see what happened there. It looks like I praised him for some nice specs. And then I identified there was a missing assertion in a unit test. So like this line wasn't covered.
I'm gonna be nosy and ask,
Yeah.
how did you identify that the line wasn't covered? Did you
Yes,
rely
I'm so glad you
on
asked this
something?
question. Well, yes, I'm so glad you asked this question. This is like by far one of my favorite things to do during review. Such a good question. So like all reviews, I check them out locally. So I'm back, clean master branch. I curl the MR diff, not or apply. I don't even think that works in Bash. I pipe it to apply. I add all the changes. So what I do to test coverage, because some of these test files are like really big too. But I will run the test locally without even looking at it. I'll just run this locally. Hopefully the test passes. I'm gonna first, let's just assume this pass. Oh, come on. These first runs are gonna take longer than the subsequent.
Also, Zoom is running, so
Yeah, I got a fancy computer though, right? My fancy computer told me it can multitask. Unlike myself. So what I do then, so this is the unit test I'm running, and I will just straight up like change. I'll see what lines we're changing, and I'll actually just introduce bugs. Like
chaos monkey approach.
Yeah, so this is actually called mutation testing. And what you're doing is you're introducing mutants into the subject or the production code. And if the tests pass, your coverage fails. So if I can introduce bugs and the tests still pass, I have not adequate tests. So I will do that. That's my favorite way to test our test coverage is looking at the lines that are changed, eyeballing the test changes. Usually I'll see like we changed this and then we didn't even touch the corresponding unit test file. And it's like, okay, let me remove our change and do the test still pass and or fail. And if they do, hey, let's add a unit test for it. Yeah, and so sometimes I'm often corrected too. Like sometimes I'll find that me introducing a bug or removing the change was actually caught, which I didn't realize. You do have to keep in mind too of like sometimes there's feature spec changes that some things will be caught at a higher level, and that's okay. But so this is really helpful just at the unit test level of me knowing what's covered and what's not. So you could do the same thing in the backend code of changing a function to throw an error or be erroneous values or something. And if this would cause a bug and our tests aren't failing, that's a really good signal if our coverage isn't good enough.
And so it wouldn't be a call with me and Paul on it if I did not say this, but the JetBrains IDE and RubyMine, which I use, when you run your test, if you right click, there's an option to run with coverage, and then it will automatically highlight red and green
That's fancy.
the lines which are covered and which are not.
That's fancy. Yeah.
I know also sometimes you can see that in the changes view of the merge request diff, but I don't, yeah, I can see it right there. Like, well, I just saw something that had like a green highlight. Sometimes I've seen it in like red, but I don't, maybe the coverage report's not as accurate all the time, or it doesn't run every time. I don't know.
It's like there's the under coverage thing that will fail, but it and I just had this happen because we try to minimize the test runtime and run like only the subset of specs which are needed by the code that you changed. Sometimes like it can actually be covered, but not by a spec that got run as part of that MR, so it thinks it wasn't covered because it didn't run the 100,000 specs that we have in the entire suite.
Yeah. So I'm trying to
which is why I love testing it locally in my IDE, especially on new code that I write. I like to just right click run with coverage and ensure I have, and it also puts in the nav on the left the percentage. So like, is every file I change at 100%? Good.
Yeah. So it's going back to the scope of this change, I'm noticing some changes. Specifically, can you all think of, are there any maybe undesirable side effects to using once here? So the intent is to capture events. So let's go to what onEditorTouch is doing. Every time someone is touching this editor, we want to track the event they touched it.
It depends what the intent of this metric is. Oh, go ahead.
Like they might enter the IDE and then not make a change at all.
Yeah.
Or they may leave the window open all day long and you actually want to know more about what they're doing, but you only got the very first one.
Is there you have to commit the changes, don't you, in the IDE? So would it be more useful to track that particular?
So there is a flurry of tracking here. Like, so this is just one of the things. Like, did they touch this editor? I am 99% certain there's another one that's testing. Did they actually go all the way to the submission of the thing? So I think
in that case, it's fine. Yeah.
That's how I feel is like, I mean, this is fine, but the once I think means it's only gonna ever happen once, like for the whole life of the thing. It's like, did we touch this at least once during the time? So maybe this is a little nitpicky, but maybe that's worth adding to the label. Like, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe it's not.
Yeah, it might be like access instead of interaction, right?
Yeah.
I at least access this, but not every time I interacted with it.
Which would you all feel like that is a non-blocking? I feel like it's what do you think? Is it a blocking comp question? Small. Is it a blocking question or a
I mean,
non-blocking?
I guess I'd look at the issue and see what the requirements were on the product level.
I do not think this is an issue, MR. This is a
Or, yeah. Does it reference anything? Like a Slack discussion or
no, this I believe Giannis is in a single engineer group. So I think I believe so. And so I think
It's using incubation engineering. So they basically have their mandate of what they're doing and they just do it.
yeah.
Well,
So
maybe it could be a question that you ask.
yeah, I definitely want to ask a question about it, but my question, I'm not sure if I want to throw this non-blocking thing in there. And so the thought process in my head is, what is the worst case scenario that could happen? We measure something and misinterpret what it means, but that's not really that bad. And that's just for a small window. So I feel like this is a non-blocking one. Because I feel like the worst case scenario of this name not being totally right is not that bad. So let me ask a non-blocking question. Maybe we should consider changing the label to reflect that this only tracks when the editor has been touched once. Maybe something like pipeline, wizard, editor. You said accessed? Did you say like, or?
Yeah, like semantically, that seems more appropriate. Like if you're only doing it once, that's like you access this. Every time you touch it, you're interacting with it, which is not a once type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds good. That makes sense. I do want to I really do want to verify this once behavior. I really do want to verify that for my own sake, because we don't do these onces a lot in Vue, and I am compelled to want to just double check it. It looks like the other significant change to this MR is just these doc changes, where it's hard to tell what's going on in this kind of diff, but if I go here, we're just adding a lot of white space, but adding this documentation to these YAML interfaces that he's had before. I think that's really the only to-do left for me on this MR is I want to verify that once behavior. I'm looking now, I'm just doing a read through of seeing if anything is really jumping out at me. But we have testing for, and I remember verifying this earlier and praising it. I don't think anything's changed. If I was really nervous about something that I reviewed previously changing, I would visit the commits. And yes, so like these were, rather than just overwriting the same commit, Giannis did the really helpful approach of just adding new commits for me to look at to see what's actually changed since the last time I've seen this. So this one is interesting where the touch event would fire. Okay, so we did fix this where this touching is, these events are firing differently. I see we fixed that, but all we've done is remove a test. Don't know. So that's maybe there's some missing test coverage here. I could do my, let's see if there is. Let's see if there is. Let's run this test. Let's watch it.
Can you drop a link to this one?
To this MR?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops. Oh no. Oh no. Did I lose it? Oh, was I at? Here we go. All right. So let me see what happens if I remove this line. Are we still passing? Ah! Yeah. So this is a good indicator of, yeah. We've got lines of code that we're not necessarily testing. Maybe they're being tested elsewhere. Let me run it for the whole folder just to double check. And then it'll be time to bid adieu. Yeah, we've got some missing test coverage. Well, that's okay. We'll add some tests for it. So that'll be a comment for me.
And next time I can show how to do the coverage in the IDE.
Yeah, those are good.
The one quick comment I was going to make is as far as removing yourself as a reviewer, the new process they added where you could put the number emoji, you know, the blue 1, 2, 3, 4, that will determine how many concurrent reviews you have assigned to you. So the unassigning yourself interacts with that. Like Paul loves reviews. He would happily do like 50 a day. I personally, I'm like, you know, couple at a time is my max, maybe one if it's a bad week. So if I remove myself, I'm gonna get another one.
So the trick is put like some really large number there, like 5, and then just, you know, create MRs and assign yourself as the assignee and reviewer and make it seem like I'm open for reviews. It's not pinging me.
Yeah, nobody would notice that.
Exactly. Hey, thanks everybody for hopping on. This was fun. You all have a great rest of the week and weekend. Adios.
Thank you.
Bye.